Hi, this is Cheryl Petersen with Healing Science Today. A few months ago, I posted a video about the Manual of the First Church of Christ Scientist. Since that time, a little voice keeps talking to me, telling me to do better. Get rid of the snarky attitude, Cheryl. I was a member of the church for 30 years and am familiar with the church manual written by Mary Baker Eddy, but that doesn't give me the right to poke fun. Mary Baker Eddy corrected her mistakes. For example, when first teaching Christian Science, she called herself doctor and reverend. For years, she taught others to use the title of doctor when in the business of healing publicly, even though they hadn't earned the degree properly through higher education and engagement with scholars. Mary's sister, Abigail, in a letter, poked fun at Mary for her self-titling habit. But with years of experience, later, Mary wrote in the Manual of the First Church of Christ Scientist, Article 8, Section 19, students of Christian Science must drop the titles of Reverend and Doctor except those who have received these titles under the laws of the state. This is interesting, not so much because Mary did correct herself, but apparently she welcomed and appreciated students of Christian Science who were educated doctors. Anyway, when searching the manual through the eyes of wanting to do better rather than repeat an inspired writer, a few facts become obvious. The manual was written in real time. It dealt with the present moment. Mary continually updated and revised the manual until her death in 1910. Article 1, Section 9 reads, "Law constitutes government, and disobedience to the laws of the Mother Church must ultimate in annulling its tenets and bylaws." Not to annul a bylaw requires useful interpretation. Before the turn of this century, I questioned the rigid use of the King James Version of the Bible in Bible lesson sermons and church services. I heard arguments for the King James Version. It's sacred. It's closest to the truth. It's the version Mary Baker Eddy expected us to use. It took some mental gymnastics on my part to sort through those arguments, but it was the manual itself that shot holes through all the arguments justifying the ritual of using KJV. Nowhere in the church manual are the words King James Version. In all references to the Bible, that is what I read, the Bible. I can read many versions to get the inspired word and increase my understanding of God and of myself. To think otherwise is incorrect. Now, this also makes me wonder if the ritualistic use of the King James Version indirectly annuls bylaws that mention the Bible, or if it makes Mary Baker Eddy almost sound prophetic. Article 8, Section 11 of the manual regarding incorrect literature or interpretations. I'll read Eddy's words. They incorrect statements involve schisms in our church and the possible loss for a time of Christian Science. History shows the church has been in decline since the mid-20th century, before I was born. I remember divisions within the church and am aware that Christian Science is quite unknown in the world today. But enough wondering. Once I accepted the use of and gratitude for many Bible versions, it was obvious that Mary Baker Eddy's pattern of revising her own Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures was requisite and lawful. At the turn of this century, I felt inspired to revise Mary Baker Eddy's Science and Health and began the work, but came to a nerve-wracking religious bump in the church manual, Article 35, Section 3, reading, "No new tenet or bylaw shall be adopted, nor any tenet or bylaw amended or annulled without the written consent of Mary Baker Eddy, the author of our textbook, Science and Health." The problem with that bylaw Mary Baker Eddy is dead. Moreover, nearly 24 times in the manual, Eddy demanded consent, her own consent, or approval, or written authorization from herself before members made decisions and did something. What are my options? Practice spiritualism or psychics and talk to the dead? I'm no good at that. I want to ask God what to know and do. Another option, to practice lawlessness by thinking I'm following the church manual because I revere Mrs. Eddy. Well, I don't revere Mary Baker Eddy. I respect her, but no reverence. The questions continue. Do I belong to a branch church that doesn't have the obligatory 16 members? Do I belong to a branch church that doesn't have an active certified public practitioner of Christian Science? If so, then I'm annulling bylaws. I am practicing lawlessness. It wasn't an easy decision, but I withdrew my membership about 20 years ago, not so much because I didn't want to pretend I was following rules that I wasn't. I withdrew my membership because church officials asked me to stop revising Mary Baker Eddy's Science and Health. Their arguments, however, were not inspiring or inspired. So I continued the work and published 21st Century Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, a modern version of Mary Baker Eddy's Science and Health, now in its 6th edition. And this is where that Article 35 was spotlighted with new insight. I imagined Mary Baker Eddy revising that same article by law with better wording, less bossy, maybe a tad bit of snark. This is how the bylaw could see it. Okay, look, when the church manual or Science and Health need revising, do it with the intent of the golden rule. Do it with God, and not to justify some churchy lingo or ritual, but make good and sure you do not put my name on the book. Do not make me the authority for something I didn't do or write. My book remains. And for heaven's sakes, get the latest edition of the church manual and Science and Health copyrighted. There's a ton more work to do, and the work isn't maintaining empty buildings. It's being honest, helpful to humanity, transparent, lawful.